Hello, people out there. So I'm Lisa Ganora. I started studying herbs in 1986. I was led into herbalism by a dandelion root, getting me off of an addiction. And it worked so well that caused me to examine my notions of reality, one of which was that herbalism was a superstition. But one thing led to another, and I found my way up to the Wise Woman Center and had my mind blown open by a catnip plant communicating with me in language. And ever since then, I'm like, what is this world of plants? It's a deep, deep, awesome rabbit warren. And I've been down in it. So I did the village herbalist, wildcrafting, lived in the southern Appalachians for 10 years, and followed some old timers around, learned some good old, what do they call that? Good old time medicine. A lot of hands-on with plants then, a lot of medicine making. Used to do the festival circuit with my herb booth. And then I moved to, let's see, let me get this all straight. So I moved to this area, not this area, but to Colorado in 2000. But even before that, I went back to university in North Carolina. So I was like, there's a million herbalists. What shall I specialize in? So I'm nerdy. So I went back and studied a lot of chemistry and botany and all the nerdy plant-related things that I could come up with, including one of those independent study semesters where I wrote a thesis about pokeweed. Yeah. So that was really fun because I got to research pokeweed and experiment with pokeweed and like go to obscure libraries and find old books from the 1700s and read them about pokeweed. It's really a cool adventure back in the day. So I have spent a lot of time with this wonderful plant. So I did that and I graduated, and then I'm like, okay, nerdy chemistry. I was looking for a good book about herbal constituents, right? Phytochemicals. The only good books were written for like grad students or PhD people or whatever, like herbalists couldn't understand them. So I was like, this is a gap. So I wrote a textbook for herbalists about herbal constituents and extractions and like all the things about herbal chemistry that are sort of useful to people. And that got my name out and people started hiring me to teach those things. So I've taught at like medical schools and whatnot. And that's my nerdy thing behind the curtain. I do formulation for products for companies, herbs, CBD companies, all kinds of stuff. So like yesterday until 11 p.m. I was on the computer like chemistry nerding with herbs. So that's like the other side of my existence. Because there's just no money in pokeberries. So, but what I really love to do is be, hands-on with herbs and working with plant spirits and plant energies and herbal healing and medicine making and all the things everybody loves to do with plants. I mean, I love it all, it's all good. It's just, I have like 8 legs, I guess, because I'm a spider and they're all in different worlds. I just made that up. People are like, you've got a foot in 2 worlds. And I'm like, I've got about 8 going right now. So, but studying plants, I don't know how long y'all have been studying plants, but it never, it's almost like you're running backwards through time because the more you learn, the more there is to learn, the more you realize you don't know, that kind of thing. So I've been at it since 86 and not a moment of boredom with it. Not a moment where I go, oh, so I'm a master herbalist now. Nope, not saying that. I feel like maybe by the time I'm 80, maybe, I could use the M word. It's a complex world. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Right? Yeah. Teaches you a lot about ego. You think you know something, and then it turns out, and you're like, oh, so I didn't actually know that. I consider plants to be the master pharmacists. Like, our modern medicine is a pale imitation although it's really good at certain things. Like as far as subtlety and complexity, a lot of our pharmaceutical approach is just like baby steps compared to what plants can do. I mean, face it, they've been working out their chemistry in a coevolutionary fashion with all the other beings in their worlds for hundreds of millions of years. And then we pop up and go, look what I can do, and think we're such hot stuff. And then, we cause all kinds of problems. We really got an Enkidu complex going around here. So, poke. Pokem, skokum, like there's 1,000 names for it, is a Native American plant. Does anybody here have pokeweed growing besides Karen?
I'm trying to think of what the other common names of it.
Pokeberry, pokeweed, poke, Phytolacca americana, Phytolacca americana.
It's a vine?
No, we're going to meet some.
Okay.
It's a yeah. It's sort of a bush. It's like not really a bush, but it's like has a bush-like character.
Okay.
It's a big, stout, vigorous, impressive, amazing, not bush, because like it doesn't have a persistent woody stem. It goes back down to the ground every year, right? But yeah, I like that question. Actually, I've never like thought of, is it a bush? So that's cool. It's bush-like. There you go. Okay. It's bush-like. We'll see some. So Phytolacca, it means red plant, like red dye plant, like lac, what? Lake is a dye name, color, paint. The lac insect. There's a bug that makes red color, and it's something lac insect. So it refers to the bright magenta coloring. Look at that. Right? Pretty remarkable. Like I could just like, yeah. Have any of you played with this as a kid, just for the funness of it? One berry. I grew up in southern Missouri, mostly in the Ozarks, and this is very abundant there. And so we would do things like this all the time.
Do they use it for dyeing clothes?
It's hard. It browns. It's hard to fix. It's most fixable in acidic frozen conditions. Yeah, the color is really hard. It's water soluble, and it's hard to keep it. Yeah, because you really don't see like bright, beautiful pokeweed dyed things, and people have tried a lot. Because think about it, Southern Appalachians, you want to make your clothes this color, this would be great, or Ozarks. I look at you, I'm like, what are the name of those mountains where I grew up? Like, you know that, right? But yeah, it's difficult to fix it. Wow, that is the craziest color. Same thing that makes beets this color, right? So it's a really complex plant. It has very, very powerful medicine, and it also has poison, and you have to know how to use it correctly. So let's say pokeweed. Who has heard anything at all about poke or pokeweed or Phytolacca before? Anything at all? What do you know so far?
Mastitis.
Mastitis.
Anti-cancer,
Lymphatic mover, anti-cancer, right? Low dose herb. Conceivably could kill you. There are a few case reports going back to the late 1700s of people that may have died from ingesting this herb. And there's one modern one. I'll give you the scare first. Right? Because it has a lot of applications for sure. I just feel like I have to do this the whole time. I'm like, ooh, okay. Just kind of letting it dry. Okay. I should have done my whole face with this. Halloween is coming. What was I talking about? Oh, so here's what not to do. So there's one modern case report of a very unfortunate happening, which is somebody went and picked wild grapes.
Oh.
And it wasn't wild grapes, it was pokeweed. And they threw them all in a blender and whizzed it up and drank a glass of grape juice and died.
No. Wow.
Right?
Can you absorb it through your skin, doing that to your hands?
Nope.
Okay.
This is the harmless medicinal part. So every plant has many hundreds of, that's a beautiful quilt, hundreds of constituents, right? Phytochemicals in it. Some of them are deadly, some of them are extremely beneficial, some of them are nutrients, some of them do specific things, some of them seem to not do anything that we know about. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this plant. It's really complex. A lot of people don't teach this plant until people are like third year advanced herbalism or whatever. And I'm like, okay, we'll just teach it in a safe manner to basically everybody because y'all are listening and you're not stupid. And so heed the cautions. So yeah, if I ate all of these, I would probably have bloody diarrhea. No, okay, that's an exaggeration. If I ate all of these, I would probably have cramping, nausea, diarrhea, etc. If I chewed the seeds inside up, I would be seriously, seriously ill. So big lesson number one is the seeds are toxic. Okay? The seeds inside the berry are toxic. So that's why the person who threw them in the blender died, because the blender cracked the seeds open. Right? There's lots and lots of case reports of people accidentally eating the leaves, right? And getting super sick and having bloody diarrhea and low blood pressure and losing a lot of electrolytes and being really, really ill, right? And that's because, have you ever heard of poke salad? The word I just said is not salad, right? Do you guys know the difference between salad and salad? So salad is what we eat raw in a bowl, right? Salad is S-A-L-L-E-T. Okay? That means cooked greens. It's an old, archaic word. Poke salad. You know, and there's that song, Poke Salad Annie. They got it wrong. It's supposed to be Poke Salad Annie. So people hear salad and they're like, oh, I can eat the leaves. And they throw in the salad and then disaster happens. Right? So
Toxic like the seeds.
I'm spinning the story of that. No is the direct answer.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, the seeds are the most toxic part. The leaves, when they're young, when they shoots first come up out of the ground and they're still rolled up and they're like this big or smaller, you can cook them in 2 changes of water. Throw the water out, cook them, throw the water out, right? And they taste like asparagus. And they're delicious. That's the salad. That's poke salad. And when I don't know if you can still get it, but you used to be able to buy that in a can in the South. You know, you go to an old-fashioned small town southern grocery and you could get poke salad in a can, right? So what's up with the 2 changes of water? You're washing something water soluble out that's toxic, right? And what it is in the leaves, and also in the berries, but not the seeds, is called saponins or saponins, S-A-P-O-N-I-N-S, right? And they're like soap. So if you think salad and you don't do that, it's going to make you sick. If you think salad and you do the changes of water and you get them when they're shoots, then that's a level of saponins that's not going to make you sick, right? So that's where the confusion comes from with the salad thing. So it's one of those plants that you really have to, it requires knowledge and respect in order for it to work for you. You have to know how to approach it, right? So that's the leaves. And generally, the mature leaves are too rich in saponins, so we don't even do that with them. It's just the shoots, right? Because it accumulates saponins as the leaves mature, right? So just the early spring shoots, and they are really good. So it's kind of worth the effort if you have plenty of them. Now, what the heck are we even doing? Like, this is not supposed to grow here, according to the USDA range maps. It stops at the dry line, which is like eastern Kansas, right? The US dry line. So, in the eastern, 100 miles or so of Kansas, you see a lot of this in the riparian areas, especially, and then down in Missouri and all in the east, tons of it in the Appalachians, right? And even up into New England, and I don't know how far south it goes, but it's pretty widespread, but it's not supposed to grow out here, in any of the botanical descriptions, like all the written material says there's no pokeweed here. So when I moved here from the southern Appalachians, that was like something I was sad about. Just missed my pokeweed, And then one day I went to the Denver Botanical Garden, and outdoors there's a gigantic pokeweed growing. Have any of you been to DBG? Have you seen this pokeweed? It's in the Chinese medicine. It's like on the edge of the Chinese medicine garden. It's like huge, and I was just stunned. I just stood there like gaping. I'm like, why? How? So I looked into it a little bit, and it has high water requirements, right? So it doesn't really mind anything but the dry, Also, I saw some in New Zealand, which was really trippy. There's a Chinese species. It looked like maybe it had come from there. So it's around the world. And it is in Chinese medicine too. But so you got to water it a lot out here, right? And in the winter, see, we constructed a tent over the pokeweed last night because it's frost sensitive. Like as soon as it gets a touch of frost, it's done, But then it dies back to the ground, so we just heaped up a bunch of straw over it for the last, I think this one is 3 years, this is its third year now. We just heaped a bunch of straw up over it for the winter. And it won't start coming up until it warms up. So like a lot of things are like, yay, spring is here. And the pokeweed is like waiting underground until it's actually warm and there isn't going to be another frost, and then it comes up. So it didn't take like a crazy amount of work to get it to, grow here, which is pretty exciting. It's the first one that gets watered. It's like, oh, we have a bucket of rain. Yay, water the pokeweed. Because it really likes a lot of water. So you can do it. So that's really cool because it's a really important plant, right? I never finished the toxicity story into cultivation. Okay, so mature leaves, right? Too much saponins. Shoots, cook them in 2 changes of water, and then they're awesome. Otherwise, they'll make you sick, right? I'll get to the root last. Berries. Oh my goodness. So part of my thesis experiments back in the day was I wanted to see how many berries I could eat before it made me ill. So instead of experimenting on other people, I experimented on myself. And I am going to demonstrate for you how to eat a pokeberry. Very, very interesting. And then you are welcome to try it. So the old-fashioned name for a pokeberry, look at you. Look at that color. See, the reason they look black is because they're so dark with this. I'll get to that. Don't let me forget that. But the old name before they changed it, because they keep changing botanical names. I don't know if you noticed that. Rosemary isn't like Rosmarinus officinalis anymore. It's Salvia rosmarinus. That just happened. They decided it was a sage and they salviated it. Anyway, so this used to be called Phytolacca decandra, right? So if you look in the old books, like from the 1800s and early 1900s, Phytolacca decandra, Decandra, which means, what's deca mean? 10 seeds. So the average number of seeds, this thing is so ripe, it's just squishing open as I lightly hold it. The average number of seeds in a pokeberry is 10. But the range, determined by me, eating hundreds of them and counting the seeds as I spit them out, was from 8 to 13. So that's an important thing to know. So what does that mean? If you're eating a pokeberry, you need to count. And it's probably going to be 10, but there could be more. Very zen. Very zen undertaking, eating a pokeberry. Also, you gotta watch your teeth. You don't want to bite them open. See how little they are? 6, 7. I made a bell curve. 8. It was very steep. 9. 10. Aha. 11. Yay, my demo berry turned out to be the oddball. That's good. Now I just have a skin, which I'm nibbling. Let me make sure I didn't count wrong. 11. 11. Not 10. But most of them do have 10. So this makes you pay close attention, right? So these aren't like blueberries or something. You're not popping in your, they're not food. They're medicinal berries. And old Appalachian tradition. Why do we care? Old Appalachian tradition was, you'll see the sprays of berries. They would pick one of those sprays and they would hang them up to dry in the cabin, right? Or the dwelling, whatever sort. And they would let them dry, and then they would take one and swallow it like a pill every day to keep the rheumatism away. The rheumatism, right? Which meant any kind of swollen or sore joints or achiness, all kind of got lumped together under rheumatism, right? Joints hurt, muscles hurt, back hurts, things hurt. So what about the seeds? That's right. They swallowed it like a pill and they passed right through. So it's the breaking open of the seeds that's the danger, right? Y'all are going to have some pokeberry seeds at the end of this class. And they do like to freeze, so you can plant them in the fall. Yep. I want container. Okay. And they're lovely, shiny little black things, right? So you don't want to break the seeds open. They actually studied the seeds when HIV was getting heavily researched back in the 80s. There's something inside the seeds that kills HIV viruses, but it also kills you. But they tried to make a medication out of it. So there's a lot of scientific study that was done on it to see if they could make that into a useful drug. But they had to give up on it after a while because it was just too toxic. It couldn't, killed the viruses great, but unfortunately poisonous to humans. So I did that, and I got up to, in my thesis research, I got up to 25 berries with spitting the seeds out, every one of them, and counting them and writing it down, because science, yay. And at 25 berries, I stopped. And the reason was my mouth was stinging, right? And that's also because there are saponins in the berries, just less than in the leaves. So, soap stings, right? So I got up to 25, and I'm like, do I feel sick yet? And the only thing that was happening was my mouth was all a sting. A fire, a flame, a sting. My mouth was all a sting. And I was like, yeah, I should probably stop, because that's an adverse effect. But I never got GI sick, and I never got funny in the head, because some people, if you accidentally take too much poke root tincture, you can be like, oh boy, this is weird, you know? So none of that stuff happened with me.
Did you notice that you didn't have any rheumatic symptoms?
I didn't have, yeah, it didn't, you're absolutely right. That was pre-rheumatic experience. Yeah, but one would assume that if I had something like that going on, it could have had a pretty big effect on it.
Have you done the trial like eating one a day, like?
So not consistently, you know. Yeah, but you know, when they're on plant in season, I'll usually eat like 2 or 3, or depending on how adventurous I'm feeling, more every day. I haven't actually like dried them and popped them like the pill consistently. I mean, I've done it to see what it was like and stuff.
Try it.
But yeah,
So intestinal
absolutely.
substance acids, stomach acids and intestinal chemicals can't break that seed coat down and
Goes right through.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, like the way that they propagate themselves is they go through a bird first.
oh,
Right? Because they're not super excited about growing unless they've gone through someone's digestive system.
so we could eat one and take a poop and then
Right. You could like prepare the hole. You could, that's an interesting idea.
So I had one in a pot, and the reason I have it in the greenhouse is it leaked out of the pot
Wow.
and just kept going, and we can't get rid of it. I mean, Alicia and I chopped it completely down, and it comes back,
Wow.
and then it leaked outside the greenhouse.
Wow. You should just like worship it instead of get rid of it.
Well, no, it's there. It's huge.
You could turn all the people onto using it and there'd be a huge demand for like poke, but everyone has to be trained like before they can use the poke or whatever. Yeah, so what did they do in the old days with these berries besides like make themselves beautiful? Is they were famous as what they used to call old archaic herbalist language, an alterative and a deobstruent. How about that one? So have you heard alterative or alterative before? Right? So that's a class of herbs that, here's the short form definition. It works slow. They work slowly, steadily, profoundly to alter the physiology of the body in order to correct chronic diseases. Right? So it's sort of a not like acute situation where it's like, oh, I burned myself, or oh, I have a raging sore throat or whatever. But more like applicable for rearranging everything so that the chronic condition can resolve, right? An alterative. Another old-fashioned name for that is blood cleaner. You might see people or hear people talking about, oh, they're a blood cleaner, an alterative or an alterative, right? So they can be pretty profound medicine. So back in the, before 1911 in North America, there were lots of different kinds of doctors practicing with equal legal protection. It wasn't monopolistic like it is now, right? A lot of people don't know the history of North American medicine. So there were botanical doctors of different ilks. There were like, water doctors. There were homeopaths. There were like sweat lodge doctors. There were root doctors. There were like all kinds of doctors. And you could just be some kind of doctor and open your office and be a doctor. For better or worse, right? But there was a lot more diversity in the medical system. So, some of those doctors really specialized in using Native American plants of lower toxicity. So this was one of those doctors were called the physio-medicalists and later the eclectics, right? And this was one of their favorite herbs, and it was probably one of their most toxic herbs that they used. Okay, so here's where we take our first 5-minute break. So the botanical doctors, this was a huge popular remedy because what they would do was they would make, I don't know if you guys have made this together before, but they would make what they called a succus out of these. Succus. S-U-C-C-U-S. Has anyone heard of that before? That basically means when you tincture the juice of something. So what you can do, and well, I can't show you because it's full of delicious rowan berry candy that you should eat if you want to. But what you can do with these is put them in a wire basket strainer like that one over there, and not like mash them, but just like, rub them through by hand, right? And then the juice comes out and a lot of the flesh of the berries comes out, and you can even kind of work the skins through, but leave the seeds behind in the basket strainer, and then tincture that juice, right? And that's how you can get pokeberry tincture without having the seeds in it. So you remove the seeds by wire basket manipulations, right? Yeah, so with ethanol to preserve it, right? And you want your finished succus to have 25% ethanol, right? So you can learn from your teacher how to make 25% ethanol.
You can do, like, if you're doing 100 proof alcohol, you can do 50-50 juice, 50, 100 proof.
Yeah, so if you've got like 100 proof vodka, you can do half juice and half 100 proof vodka, and the finished product will turn out to be 25% alcohol. And the reason I'm going 25% is that's about how much you need to actually preserve. Like if you use like, oh, well, I don't like that, I'm going to use 10%, you might get some sort of interesting fermentation product or mold colony going in your suckers. But you don't want to use too much alcohol because, as you just saw, this stuff is water soluble. So it doesn't really like alcohol that much, like some sticky resinous things like a lot of alcohol, but this likes as little alcohol as necessary to preserve. Some people will say 20%. I think that's marginal. Right. But 25% is easy to get to, just like she said, if you've got 100 proof vodka, that means it's 50% alcohol. So if you use half juice and half that, your final product will be 25% alcohol. So it's an easy one to math, if you don't want to.
Easy math. I do.
Yeah. Easy math, all math, easy math. So Doctors, really popular. They made a succus, right? And, there are actually like still some bottles of that in existence. I have a photograph I took of one down at Michael Moore's place when Michael Moore was alive. He's got like antique bottles, and it's like, oh, pokeberry juice. It was a big seller, right?
I think
Because-
you can see it also. There's like an old time museum in Montrose, and I remember seeing
Whoa,
that there.
whoa. Do you all know about the Pharmacy Museum in Uray? You guys know that there's like world-class pharmacy museum in Uray, Colorado, and like nobody knows about it because you have to make an appointment to go in there. It's freaking mind-blowing. I always wanted to take a field trip there. Like we should totally do that. Yeah, hot springs afterwards. It's amazing. I went there like a couple of years ago and spent like 4 hours with the dude because he gives a tour for an hour, and 4 hours later we were like, it's cool. Yeah, so anyway, it was really popular back in the day as an alterative blood cleaner and lymphagogue, right? So that's what we call it in herbalist speak when something moves the lymph, which is actually metaphorical. But a lot of people have learned it as a lymphatic herb, right? So a thing that you would do, okay, so let me talk a little bit about the lymphagogue. So the succus of the berries, also the root was used this way. We'll get back to that in a little more detail. But a lymphagogue, so the agog thing means it moves, like a galactagogue moves milk, right? Etc. So the agog is like, I love saying agog. It sounds so Harry Potter. So a lymphagogue. So back in the old days, before they really understood how the body worked, on a sort of scientific level, everything was observational, right? So example, I'll get to the lymphagogue, but example, if you needed a blood cleaner, that meant you had bad blood, which we might translate to accumulation of toxins, right, of some sort, mostly endogenous, but also out from the world. And that would show up on your face as being like not a ruddy, healthy looking pink color for light-skinned people, right? So if you were like pale or kind of ashy or kind of gray, and they would see your face, right, and they would look at you, or you would have a lot of eruptions, like the bad blood was trying to work its way out. So you'd have like acne classically, or eczema or something like that, which are all expressions of some sort of attempt of the body to detoxify something, right? So they would look at your face and they would be like, oh, you have bad blood. And like, why were they looking at your face? Remember how people used to dress back then, right? Yeah. Like, it's very risque if you showed an ankle as a female person before like 1920 or something, right? So like, diagnostics, visual diagnostics, they would look at the face, or if somebody had like a pale face with red patches or whatever, they'd be like, oh, bad blood, have a blood cleaner. That's how people thought about it, have a lymphagogue, right? Because people knew lymphatic fluid existed, but they didn't understand that it was totally interconnected with blood. That's all one big fluid circulation in the body, right? So like, we have blood vessels, we have lymphatic vessels, right? And the way it works is your blood circulates, but then when it gets to a tissue level, your blood vessels get tiny, tiny, tiny. They become capillaries, or as I love to say, capillaries, like they say in the UK. It's a beautiful, it says capillaries. Love it. And the fluid of your blood oozes out of those capillaries into the tissue and bathes all the cells, right? But it's the same fluid. But the blood cells ideally stay inside the blood vessels and keep circulating. Like your red blood cells, your white blood cells, they come and go as required. But the fluid of your blood, the plasma, oozes out of the capillaries, bathes the cells, delivers nutrients, carries away waste products, right? And then it gets picked up from the tissue fluid by the tiny lymphatic capillaries, right? So that's the beginning of your lymphatic system, your lymphatic circulation. And then it gathers all that fluid and they get bigger and bigger, and then there are lymph nodes along the way, right? If you get a sore throat and these things swell up, people are like, I have swollen glands. They're not glands. Glands make hormones. They're lymph nodes, right? And they swell up when you get an infection or you get sick because there's a giant white blood cell party going on inside there. They're cloning and multiplying themselves by the billions in order to kill off whatever has triggered your immune response. Bacteria, virus, piece of gluten, whatever, and they swell up and they hurt, right? So those are your lymph nodes, but the lymph all flows there, and then it's big like white blood cell congregation, like tries to clean everything up. And then after that, your lymph, collects in bigger and bigger ducts, and it comes up here and it goes back into your blood circulation again, right under here. Okay, so it's the same fluid, it's just doing this giant circulation, right? First it's your blood plasma, then it becomes tissue fluid, and then it becomes lymphatic fluid, and then it gets groomed in the lymph nodes, and then it returns back to become blood plasma again. Some of it goes on to become cerebrospinal fluid, so there's no like separation, hard and fast separation of these fluids in the body, right? So a blood cleaner is a lymphatic herb too, right? And the reason they came up with you need a blood cleaner besides the way your face looked and everything was if you had swollen lymph nodes, right? Because they knew lymph went through there from cutting open animals and repairing people. So they knew that the lymph went through the lymph nodes. So when you take a lymphagogue herb, people say it moves the lymph, but it doesn't really move the lymph. It helps the body clean the lymph. It helps the immune system do its work through the lymph fluid. There's one thing that moves lymph far more than any herb, moves lymph, and that's called, okay, right now, if I put a number on my lymphatic flow right now, I'm just making this number up for illustrative purposes. Say it's a 10. If I get up and I go like this, bye people, I'm just walking around. Then I go like this, I just increased it to about 100, right? Because lymph is moved by muscular contraction. So when people are like, oh, take an herb to move your lymph, I'm like, well, that's a silly way to do it. Get up, walk around, get some exercise, much more effective. It's not really about moving the lymph. It's about adjusting the lymph, grooming the lymph, cleaning the lymph, circulating the lymph is done by muscle, not only by a lot by leg muscles, right? That's one of the main lymphatic pumpers. Because like, what if you get edema in your ankles? Because you're standing there all day, running a cash register or something, or being a nurse or whatever. Your ankles swell up. That's lymphatic, that's tissue fluid, that's lymphatic fluid. So the muscle pump, right? People who have surgery or, stuck in bed or whatever, they have to wear those compression socks, squeeze that lymph back up, and also the return of the blood. So it's the muscles that pump the lymph, right? These don't pump your lymph. But if you have a swollen lymph node, because your immune system is on, basically on the warpath in there trying to get rid of something that could kill you, then you take something like this and it goes down, the swelling is resolved. So old-timey, they said lymphagogue. Now we know immunostimulant. Right? You see where I'm going with that? Because the immune system is everywhere, right? But it centralizes itself in the lymphatics, right? So if you don't know what this thing is, it's like 1430 and you feel that, and then you take some of this and it goes back down and you're like, oh, lymphagogue, right? So that's kind of one of the main crossovers with observational explanations of what's happening and seeing things work. And now what we know, they didn't even know immune system. Like the immune system was discovered, 100 years ago? This is new to people. We didn't know what was going on, right? And it's still being discovered how the immune system works. So, powerful immunostimulant, right? And that applies to the succus of the berries, the skins, the juice, right? The flesh of the berries, but not the seeds. I like to keep saying that because I don't want anybody to hurt themselves. It also applies low dose to tincture of the root, right? So that kind of brings us around to the root, because a lot of people, their first introduction to pokeweed medicine is tincture of the root or oil of the root for mastitis, right? But immunostimulant, strong immunostimulant, right? / lymphagogue. Did that make sense to everybody, how that works out? Yeah, you really have to look, you kind of have to deconstruct a lot of the language, because you got to realize herbalism is an ancient art and craft, and the way they talked about it back then sometimes matches up with the way we talk about it now, but sometimes you got to kind of figure out what is happening with the language, like the whole lymphagogue thing, right? So immunostimulant, very powerful. So what I do, that's one reason, when the berries are ripe like this, I almost want to make lipstick, do I have pink lips? I don't know what that was like. Oh, maybe not. Okay, I want to paint my hands up again because that was just so fun. It's so pretty. Good heavens. So see, no seeds, so not toxic, right? I saw a person cover probably 80% of their body with this one time, and I'm like, well, if there's going to be any sort of toxicity from that, we should know, and there wasn't, so we're good. Also, according to scientific studies. Oh, before I jump over to the root, there was something I wanted to say about the pink. That's why the berry got me to do this just now. So what is this? What is this pink stuff? This pink stuff is from a group of molecules called beet, like as in beets, B-E-T-A, L-A-I-N, beta-layin alkaloids. Beta-layin alkaloids. They tend to be very brightly colored. So y'all have probably heard the word alkaloid before, right? And alkaloids, generally speaking, are either strong or dramatic or toxic or psychotropic or something. Alkaloids tend to be powerful, dramatic molecules. This alkaloid is a food grade, powerful, dramatic molecule. It's actually, not only is it non-toxic, it's an antitoxin. It's an oddball alkaloid. And its color, it's water soluble. Most alkaloids, you need to use some alcohol to get them out into your tincture. Not this one. Highly water soluble, non-toxic, brightly colored, right? So it's an unusual alkaloid. Where else do you see it? Beets. This is what gives beets their color. So that right there, you're like, oh, okay, beets, not toxic. Beets. Even the golden beets, it's just a little variation on this. These come in like orange and golden too, as well as this, I call this screaming magenta. I don't know what kind. I mean, like, what is, like, there's just not an English word for that. But rainbow chard, stems of rainbow chard, right? What about purslane? You guys know purslane, right? Fantastic edible medicinal ground cover weed. No, that's different. That's another thing, kind of a flavonoid called anthocyanins. These are unusual. Prickly pear, cactus, flowers, and fruits. How are all these plants related? Amaranth. You ever see amaranth? Psh, psh. Like the purple color? Not like the grain, like the yellow pale grains, but the purple sprays of flowers, and flip the leaves over. They look like this underneath. Have you ever seen lamb's quarters that look like this underneath? Every once in a while, you'll get a lamb's quarter, what are they? Chenopodium, somebodium album or something. You'll flip them over, or you'll see in the little, where the leaf comes to the stem, or sometimes the stems will be kind of this color, right? So lamb's quarters, amaranth, purslane, red auroch. Do you guys know auroch? O-R-A-C-H. We'll see some in the garden. It's not red anymore because it went to seed. You are so welcome to take some seeds of it. Please do. So auroch is an amazing, some people call it what do they call it? Like something spinach, or some other country spinach or something. Atriplex hortensis, I think. Yeah, the leaves are so dark with this. They're like dark magenta. They're incredible health food, superfood green. Finally planted some this year. So all these things are not botanically related very closely at all. I'm sure I left a few of them out. You'll even see it in spinach. Spinach, like with the red stems, when your spinach gets red stems. That's this stuff.
Is that the same in shisha too?
No. I know. People always ask that question because you think, but that's anthocyanins. So this is like this little oddball thing that just pops up here and there in the plant world very occasionally. The plants that have it aren't even in the same family. They're like in the same order, and only some of them in the order is up there in the classification system, right? Species, genus, family, order, phylum. So they're not closely related. It's just this thing that happens sometimes. A species of plant will be like, hey, let's make this stuff, instead of the normal purple that you see in most plants. Like eggplants are purple, not this. That's the more common kind of purple. This is the oddball thing. Right? So you have to seek it out on purpose in certain plants. Why do we seek it out? Okay, so I was down at Texas. This is like one spot, like a giant place. Austin, Texas, American Botanical Council. I know you guys ever heard of it. They publish that nerdy magazine called Herbalgram. They're sort of like what are they? They're an information vortex for like people who are interested in medicinal plants, and a lot of pharmacists go there, and it's like industry booster and herbal products and quite interesting stuff. They have a particular focus. Anyway, they have a really cool garden down there in a homestead, Case something homestead, Austin, Texas. If you're over there, you should go. Why am I saying this? Oh, because I was down there giving a talk, and I met a fellow came up to me afterwards, and he's like, "Oh, let me talk to you about beta-layered alkaloids." He said at the University of Texas, they were studying 200 different plant antioxidant compounds because they just wanted to see what the strongest one was. You're looking at it right now. Out of the 200 that they've studied, the one that had the strongest antioxidant / anti-inflammatory / anti-cancer activity, beta-layered alkaloids. Right? So that's pretty impressive. And, you know, some molecules throw off color. So you're seeing a bunch of like millions, billions probably of molecules stuck to my hand right now, just radiating this color. Right? So that's a cool thing. You can see beta-layered alkaloids. You don't need like a scientific paper or scientific equipment or anything to know you've got them. You cut open a beet, there they are. You're like, oh, beta-layers, right? Super strong antioxidant powers, right? So that protects us from damage by what we call free radicals. You've probably heard this before, right? And causes chronic disease, contributes to inflammation, chronic diseases, you know, premature aging, diabetic complications, arthritis. All the chronic diseases have an inflammatory free radical damage component. This protects you from that, right? Where do free radicals come from? You've probably heard of them. Oh, they're damaging. Antioxidants, get rid of them. But where do they come from? External toxins, so like toxic chemicals in food, in water, in air, coming out of your tailpipe and some mine as well. You know, okay. We're going to segue into a little rant here. How is it that we get all nervous about things like 5G when we're pouring deadly toxins out of our tailpipes on a regular basis and not paying attention to that? If you started your car in the garage with the door shut, you would die within minutes. So let's not get distracted by hypothetical, distant sources of toxins. So, you know, free radicals coming out of tailpipes, right? Especially diesels, and lots of them. So external toxins, chlorine in your water, free radicals. Bleach in your tampons, your toilet paper, free radicals, right? Plastics oozing, free radical generating, phthalates and stuff into your food. People put a plastic thing in the microwave, it just oozes toxins out into the food, right? Saran wrap. All these things we're just kind of used to, you know? What's your furniture covered with? Fire retardant chemicals, toxins, free radicals. So we have a lot of free radical exposure because of chemical toxins, but also we make a lot of free radicals inside ourselves, right? So heavy exercise generates a lot of free radicals. Any sort of stress, right? Emotional stress, psychological stress, spiritual stress, relationship stress, occupational stress, living in America in 2020 stress, generates free radicals inside our body. We need antioxidants to get rid of those. Just normal metabolism generates free radicals. We need lots of antioxidants to get rid of those, right? Ultraviolet light coming from the sun, that's called sunburn. That's free radical damage. Macular degeneration, sunlight coming to the eyes, free radical damage, right? Overactive immune system, autoimmune diseases, free radical damage. It's just, you know, there's so many sources, right? So we need tons of antioxidants in our bodies to perform detoxification and to protect us from that damage. So knowing what the strongest botanical antioxidant is and how to get it safely is a really good life enhancement and health preserving strategy, right? So the cool thing about beets and chard and purslane and tunas, prickly pear cactus fruits, you cut them open, they're this color inside. We call them tunas, right? Also cholla cactus fruits. So Opuntia and Cylindropuntia species. So there's a lot of edible ones that aren't toxic. This happens to be the super intense medicinal one with toxic seeds. But also, when you get around the seeds, it's a really rich source of beta-lactams, right? Cool. So when you say antioxidant for plants, antioxidants are always anti-inflammatory. It's characteristic of antioxidants is to be anti-inflammatory, right? So for excess inflammation, okay? So when we talk about inflammation, we think about, the first thing we usually think about is muscle or joint inflammation, right? Like fibromyalgia, named disease entity, right? Or arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, right? But inflammation really means, and the word tells you, too much fire, too much heat, right? Flame, inflammation, old word. Too much heat, too much fire, right? Inflammation. So herbs that are considered to be cooling, you see where that goes, right? So cooling, this is considered to be a very cooling herb, right? Because it helps resolve inflammation. Okay. Inflammation manifests in a lot of ways, right? Inflammation is one of the processes that cause cancer or that allow cancer to grow and spread. But it's also one of the processes that can happen in your central nervous system, and that can throw mood-related things off, like the named disease entity called depression and the named disease entity called anxiety, are often individual manifestations of neuroinflammation, right? So having a rich supply of antioxidants can help with so-called mental illnesses, which to me, there's no difference between physical and mental. Like, show me a body walking around without a mind and vice versa. Hopefully we don't see this. Yeah, so, the fluid, it's the same fluid. It's the same fluid that we call lymphatic fluid. That's the center of the cerebrospinal fluid. So you can have inflammatory manifestations that just show up in your nervous system, even though your joints aren't aching or your skin isn't having red eruptions or whatever. You can have like that anxiety depression cycle, and that's neuroinflammation, right? So when we talk about antioxidant, anti-inflammatory herbs and phytochemicals, think about that too, right? So a lot of people don't realize that one of the sources of anxiety and depression cycle is neuroinflammation, and what the multiple causes of that, sometimes it can be heavy free radical exposure, or you get a lot of them from smoking, free radicals, any kind of burning plant material, but especially tobacco and especially non-organic tobacco, right? Introduce a lot of free radicals. Breathing, burning forests, right? A lot of free radicals, any kind of smoke, any kind of burnt thing makes free radicals. So neuroinflammation, a lot of people don't realize that that's one of the, anxiety, depression cycles, mood swings, etc., have their cause in dietary things, right? I mean, it's not the only thing that can start that going, traumas, experiences, etc., but dietary inflammation caused by ingesting things that your personal physiology cannot handle, right? That's what we're talking about when we say gluten intolerance or dairy intolerance or food allergies, food sensitivities, food intolerances. They can manifest as neuroinflammation, right? So, of course, the way to resolve that is identify that, all the hidden sources, totally remove it from your life. Right? But also, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant herbs can help resolve that neuroinflammation. Brain fog, memory problems, Alzheimer's, cognitive impairment, those are all manifestations of neuroinflammation. Super interesting to think about it that way, right? So when you get into your diet a lot of strong anti-inflammatory antioxidants, it benefits those sorts of situations. Right. So, wow, that was a deep one. Um, Beetle A and alkaloids, eat more beets. I'm working for the beet lobby. No, I'm not. Um, so, what else?
Question on the beets.
Yeah.
Does fermenting or pickling or cooking alter it?
So, if you still have the color, you still have the power.
Good. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. So, like kvass. Yeah, it probably actually makes it a little more bioavailable to ferment it, like with a lot of nutrients. And you can cook a beet pretty good and still have that beautiful color. So if you have the color, you have the activity. That's what I love about colored things.
What about pokeberry wine? That's a big thing, right?
Yeah, I have never had any. I've never seen anybody make it. I've heard about it. I don't know what it would be like. I don't even know that I would do that. Because that's, well, you got to take the seeds out, right? I mean, I think you should take the seeds out. I don't know if you have to, but then you've got like all that work and you got all that beautiful, juice. And then what are you going to do? Well, you could ferment it, I suppose, but why bother? But I guess you could. I mean, or as a medicinal thing.
It is a big thing in the South, though.
I never saw any when I lived in the South. I just heard people talk about it. I also have heard people talk about pokeberry pie, and I was like, really? But it was always like third or fourth hand information. It's like, yeah, my grandma used to say that, Aunt so-and-so made it, but I've never seen any. So I don't know if it's one of those kind of things or if there's still people that do that. I don't know how to do it. So I've never done it, never seen it, never tasted it, but maybe it's a thing. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a concern about detoxing herbs that that detox your system, but somehow your body doesn't eliminate the toxins?
Oh, good question. So somebody asked if you're doing detoxification, releasing toxins from your cells and stuff, what was the question exactly? You need to keep it moving out of the body?
Yeah, and if that's a concern for pokeberries as well as other.
So, back to the word deobstruent. This is the answer to your question. So what happens if you eat too many pokeberries while spitting out every single seed is you get a bit of diarrhea. So it actually enhances your, what they call transit time, which means how long it takes something to go from entrance to exit, right? So it moves it right along. So it removes obstructions to flow, deobstruent. Another word for that in reference to the GI system, the gastrointestinal system, the GI system, is aperient. You ever hear that old herbal word? aperient, aperient, often translated as gentle laxative, right? Gentle, not like a, oh, what's it that just makes you go like senna or cascara sagrada or blackthorn or, God forbid, aloes, things that like purge, like, but a gentle laxative, an aperient, a deobstruent, right? So, not that all detoxification herbs have that property, but this one does. And so does yellow dock. Y'all know yellow dock? Great aperient / deobstruent, gentle laxative herb, very popular with midwives, I hear. Yeah. So, that is important, is what I'm getting at. And there are things that help you move nicely on. Yellow dock is kind of my favorite because not only does it actually supports detoxification, it empowers the liver, but it helps open up the channels. And so where do toxins go? They go out that way, but they also go out through the kidneys and through pee, right? The majority of the toxins that enter and leave your body are peed out. That's the purpose of pee, Well, it's to adjust your blood electrolytes and other things in your blood, but also to remove toxins,
So you're
right?
talking about yellow dock root?
Yes, yellow dock root, yes.
In tincture, or do you eat
Oh, you can decoct it, you can tincture it. Mostly I favor decoction with yellow dock root for a cleansing sort of thing, detoxifying and cleansing. But, part of a well-designed detoxification program will include something to help you know, maybe mild diuretic and an aperient, things that help move all those transformed toxins out. Do you know which organs do your detoxification the most? Which organs in your body specialize in, well, many things, including detoxification? Liver, and kidneys, and skin, and also respiratory system for some things. You breathe out toxins, right? But liver is kind of, that's one of its main jobs, and kidneys, or, you know, they work a lot. So supporting the liver and the kidneys with supportive herbs, or you know, dandelion, yellow dog, nettles, all the famous ones. So yeah, it's important to keep that stuff moving out. You know, a lot of people like to do like some kind of sweating as part of their detoxification, move toxins out through the skin, etc. Right? Yeah. And lots of water, so much water. It's like people are like, "Ooh, celery juice," and I'm like, "All that water, all those electrolytes, all those minerals." You know, celery's great, but it doesn't have special magic powers that other, like thistle juice. You guys do thistle juice? Oh my God, you don't need to go buy celery juice. Thistle juice is even better. Just saying. So I'm going down many paths. Let's see, poke root. I should talk about poke root. Okay, so poke root, super, super strong. Pokes are perennials. They live for many, 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 many years, and they get bigger and stronger the older they get, just like ginseng does, right? So these are, if I was going to harvest poke root, I probably would not harvest these plants because they're just on their third year now, you know, so they're still young. And I know they get stronger as they get older. And like, this is so funny. Last time I harvested a poke root was probably about 20 years ago, because it was a big poke root and I've had it ever since. And I don't go through a lot of it because it's a low dose herb. But maybe, you know, if I went through a lot of it, I would just. But yeah, beside the Marmaton River in eastern Kansas, in the forest of nettles with poke punctuated by giant pokeweeds. And I dug that thing up, and that thing was like hunkin' huge, ancient poke root, you know. So as with a lot, not all roots, but a lot of roots get stronger as they get older, right? Some roots are best at the end of the first year. It just depends on the plant, right? So super powerful, really high in saponins. So remember, saponins were what made the leaves not be a salad green. Soap, sapo means soap, right? But very strong immunostimulant, anti-cancer, lymphagogue activity in the root also. Okay? So when we tincture poke root, the dose is like 1 drop or 2, or if you're really getting wild, 3. Extreme situations, maybe 5, right? So it's a drop dose herb. Did everybody hear what I said? I didn't say dropper full. I said drop, D-R-O-P, right? Every once in a while at herb school, there's that person who goes home and takes a dropper full of poke because they weren't listening to hear the drop word. So that's important. It's a drop dose herb. You don't need much. So the way I use it, and it's immunostimulant, the root as well. I really like mixing the root and the berry because I think you also get that anti-inflammatory beta-layin, immunostimulant beta-layin power. But anyway, the way I mostly use poke root is if there's a serious infection happening, right? Any kind of infection, bacterial, viral, whatever. If there's a serious infection where the immune system is excited enough to make a fever and to give you that lay in bed kind of fatigue. Do you know why you get that fatigue when you have a serious infection? Because your body's like, you, stop doing things. I need that energy to kill this pathogen. You know, because it's like life or death. That's when a fever and fatigue arises. It's meant to keep you so all your resources can go to your immune system so you can kill that germ that otherwise could kill you. You know. What's that?
How about staph infection?
Yep, any kind of infection. So a lot of times, you know, when you go to your infection herbs, you think echinacea, you think spilanthes, right? Or calendula or yarrow or, you know, your berberine containing herbs like Oregon grape or golden seal or coptis or whatever you use. So those anti-infective herbs. But this is like, poke root is like the catalytic spark that gives those extra power. You know, so say I come down with a really intense sore throat and a fever, like how COVID starts, right? So I get my little squirt bottle because, like, I love applying things to the area when possible. So if I get a sore throat, I put it in a squirt bottle and I stick the bottle in my mouth and I like squirt everywhere so I have the contact, you know, and I'll put like echinacea or spilanthes or usnea or, you know, berberine, you know, the yellow herbs. And various whatevers, and then I'll just put like a little bit of poke in that bottle, you know, and there's ways that you can math that out to make sure you're getting, like, with every squirt, X drops. I just
Talking about the berry.
I'm talking about root, but you could also do berry that way. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. Root and berry together are like,
The way that I like to use the poke is like that, where I take 1 ounce of echinacea root tincture, and I'll take 1 dropper full of the poke, and I'll mix it into that ounce, and then I'll just use that echinacea poke tincture.
yeah, that's cool. That comes out to about a drop or 2, maybe 3, depending on your droppers per dropper full. So that's smart. So you put 1 dropper full in a 1 ounce tincture bottle, then fill it up with your other immune herbs.
Usually echinacea, because I think they have a nice.
Yeah, they work really nice together, you know. So a lot of times I won't need the poke, but if it's like pretty serious or it's a stubborn situation, then I'll add the poke in, right? Because it is, you know, it's such a powerful immune system stimulant that they actually in biological laboratories, when they want to grow a whole bunch of certain kinds of white blood cells, right? Because they want to do a study, so they want to proliferate a whole bunch of white blood cells in like a petri dish or whatever. There's a thing that you buy from the chemical supply company called PWN, pokeweed mitogen. They use this like in academic labs and bio labs and stuff. And you put a little bit of that in with your and it causes them to just proliferate like crazy, to divide and make more and more and more of themselves, right? It's a white blood cell stimulant. You know, it's just super interesting that thing has like taken itself into biosciences like that. Yet most of those people would be like, booga booga, you know, but it's just cool to have that sort of verification of it. Another thing, like if you read about pokeweed in a lot of more mainstream herbal books and stuff, they'll all tell you it's like deadly poisonous, you know, don't touch it, it'll kill you, whatever. Now you know better. But it has, God, where was I going with that? Darn it, I just lost my train of thought. So there's pokeweed mitogen, causes white blood cells. Oh, so they'll say it mimics leukemia. That sounds bad and scary, doesn't it? So what's leukemia? You make way too many white blood cells. It's a blood cancer, but like the manifestation of it is your white blood cell count is way, way, way high, right? Because like cancer is like uncontrolled cell growth, right? Like cancer cells don't know when to quit. They don't know when to mature and differentiate, which means they don't grow up and turn into what they're supposed to be. They're just like perpetual, you know, teenagers, right? So you'll see this in books. Like if you go read, you know, a lot of things, it'll be like, mimics leukemia. You know, like I said, that sounds bad and scary, but what they're really saying is it causes a great proliferation of white blood cells. But it's not, it doesn't give you leukemia. It doesn't give you cancer. It's just that's the way it's made into the medical literature. Yeah.
So, do you use this prophylactically or only as treatment?
I do. The only way I use it prophylactically, right? I don't use pokeweed tincture prophylactically at all for prevention. This is my way that I do it. I'll do one berry, or if I'm feeling like, oh, if there's everyone in the house is sick, maybe I'll do 3, or like, if something's going around, or if I'm run down or stressed out and something's going around, I might do 2 or 3, but I'll do that, and I'll spit the seeds. Let's see how many seeds are in this one. 1, that's the way I use poke prophylactically, because the seeds are milder than the root, right?
Seeds are what?
Milder than the root.
The berries.
I mean, sorry. The berries are milder than the root.
Thought you were changing your mind. Don't eat the seeds.
Don't eat the seeds. The seeds are poisonous. It's really fun to put something poisonous in your mouth and then concentrate on like isolating it and removing it. It really teaches you observation powers.
But couldn't you eat it, swallow it, and it just comes out the other side?
I could,
And then you plant it.
but I'm not going to go through my poop for these, so this is the easier way to get them. Besides, I want to share them with you guys. Now that they have my cooties all over them. Cooties, it's a scientific term. I think I did just swallow a seed. I felt it slip down. Look at that. Either I swallowed more than I thought, or there weren't as many. Poke, thank you for teaching us. I love it showing us variety of number. That's 8 seeds right there. I feel like I swallowed 1. I could have swallowed 2. Right? But that's how I use it as a prevention. Okay? Say you had like an autoimmune disease, right? Autoimmune diseases are interesting because some immunostimulants are good for autoimmune diseases and some can aggravate them in some people. So it's very complicated. There's no like, this is this way, that is that way. You kind of have to try them. But if you have like a rheumatoid type autoimmune disease, like rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory joint pain, sometimes what I just did can be really helpful. Or maybe 2 or 3. Right? So back to poke root. How else do we use poke root? So make an oil from it for mastitis, right? Or lumpy breasts, fibrocystic breasts, sore breasts, breasts that get really sore before your moon time, right? Classic for mastitis. How have you like done the wilted leaf poultice thing for mastitis? You just use the
oil, but also I would do that echinacea and the 1 ounce to
Mhm.
the dropper of echinacea internally.
so you do the tincture internally,
And then you put oil.
and then you rub with the oil.
And the oil is extracted from the root.
Root, right. Infused oil. You guys have made one probably, or you will,
Yeah,
or
we made them infused comfrey last
standard infused oil. What does that sound? Okay. I thought it was a horse, but then I was like, no, it's a mechanical horse. Never mind. You never know around here what you're going to hear. So okay, focus.
I'm sorry, the oil could be used for mastitis. Could it also be used for arthritis?
Well, there's an interesting question. I've never heard of it. I don't know anything about it. Maybe it could. It would be worth trying. It's pretty low toxicity way to use the herb. I mean, I've gotten a lot of poke root oil on my hands before. Have you heard of that? Using it for,
I think it's solely worth a try. I
Yeah.
haven't used the root oil.
no, I haven't either, but it's a good thought, and I would try it just to see if you had see if it helps.
How much root would you need to put it in an oil?
So that's an Alicia question about how to make an infused oil, because there's a
Same way
process.
as we do everything, like fill the jar once and then fill it again. Fill the jar with your fresh poke,
Chop it up.
chopped up, and then fill it again with your oil. Make sure the oil has, the jar width of space on top. That's how I would do it.
That's pretty much
And
how
if
I
it's
do it too.
dried, I don't usually use dried, but I would kind of do maybe half the amount of the dried root. So if it's a cup of dried root to 2 cups of oil, and then you could either use a double boiler or let that steep for 6 weeks.
That's pretty much how I do it. I like to do my infused oils with a little bit of heat. I do like the low heat method, and that's a whole class unto itself. But yeah. So yeah, interesting question. So what else about poke root? I know somebody who accidentally took 2 droppers full of poke root tincture because they were really sick, and they had like the bottles, the old classic, I'm like delirious and here are my bedside, and they thought they grabbed the echinacea, and they took 2 droppers full of poke root tincture, and they felt woozy, dizzy, cold, and a little bit sicker, and then they went to sleep and got over it. So it wasn't deadly, which is cool. And they didn't get super sick. I don't know how strong that tincture was or what percentage alcohol it was made with or what, I don't have any details on the tincture, which can make a difference. But that was one of those accidental educational moments we like to pass around. The time when I took too much poke root tincture. Again, the usual dosage is 1 or 2 or 3 drops, per dose. I've taken 10 drops at once to see if I felt weird. Nothing happened. That's just kind of a really high dose of poke root tincture. I like to overdose on herbs. It's a really educational process. You learn which ones aren't deadly. It's like, okay, we don't overdose on poison hemlock or like monkshood or whatever, right? But not that I use those medicinally, but some people do. But just taking way too much of an herb is really educational. Just once, like, anybody ever overdose on cannabis? There's an education. Yeah. It's awful, but it's non-toxic. I will never do that again on purpose, and I will be careful not to do it accidentally because it was very unpleasant, but it wasn't deadly. That's the most I've ever taken, and I was kind of like, well, that's, the bot is like, ew, but I didn't really feel sick. So, you don't have to panic, is where I'm going with this. If you accidentally, oh my God, I took 5 drops, or oops, I took 10 drops, or maybe even a dropper full. I think the worst that would ever happen was you might puke or get dizzy or,
And I think
get diarrhea.
If you're dealing with something like something acute like a mastitis, you could start with the 1 drop dose, and then maybe the next day, if it's not cleared, go for a 2 drop dose, and then a 3 drop the next day, and maybe like up to 5 drops.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting if you look at the old books, they would, in some situations, but see, you got to think old-fashioned herbalists would treat a lot of things that we would go to the hospital for now because they didn't have the options, So they're like, oh, so-and-so had meningitis, so we did this, and then we did that, and we did these other things. It would be like, if you can go to the hospital when you have meningitis, you should go to the hospital when you have meningitis, because that can kill you. That's pretty serious. And like, take your herbs to the hospital, like I did. That was fun in Arkansas. But, they would treat like rabies and just like all kinds of crazy stuff back in the day because that's all they had. They didn't have modern medicine, rattlesnake bites. They would treat that. So they did some pretty extreme medicine with herbs, and they would dose really, really high with some really powerful herbs because they were, expert herbal physicians or herb doctors or whatever back then. So, in extreme situations with some herbs, our normal doses might increase hugely, but for most situations that we would ever encounter, this is, 5 drops is a really high dose of poke root tincture. Yeah. Some people do have a skin reaction, so if they're harvesting poke root, it can cause them to like itch and break out. Not everybody, but a lot of people are like, oh, if you're processing poke root, put on some gloves. Has that ever, have you ever seen that or had that happen to you? Like, describe it for us.
It was in Virginia, and I was walking, and I was coming up against it, and I didn't really realize that I was standing against it for a long period of time, and it was roughing against me. And then I was taking the berries and talking to people about them. And I got really tingly. It was a very funny reaction. It wasn't a rash, wasn't a welt or anything. It was just a real intense tingling all the way up the nerve dermatomes.
I've heard that before from people too. You get this weird like buzzing nerve weirdness.
It was really a nice messenger to me from the herb. I felt like I wasn't frightened of it.
Yeah. Just shows you its power.
Right.
Yeah. Super
and then
powerful.
I described it to the students I was talking and they all tried it.
Yeah,
They
it's,
were- and they, none of them had it.
yeah.
But I liked it. It was a good message,
Uh-huh.
and so now I'm very respectful of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of, like, this is a ridiculous proposition, but if anybody ever goes, what's your favorite medicinal plant? It's like, this is like I really love lobelia, but this is up there, I have a lot of respect for this herb. So shall we go into the garden and meet some living ones? Or, yeah.
So I wondered when you got COVID, how did you treat yourself?
Ooh, well, there's a nice long question. I have a write-up that I would be happy to send to anyone if anyone wants to email me. There's a lot, and there's multiple stages. There's like the immunostimulation stage, and then there's the spasmodic coughing stage, and then there's the dry inflammatory stage. So it shifts with each stage. There are many different herbs. Yeah.
Probably all on
How
it.
much time do you have? You know what I mean?
Send it
But
to me and then I'll send it to the group.
yeah, help me remember because I'll probably go to sleep and forget. But I helped out probably 20 to 25 people with COVID now, so I've got some stuff dialed in. I had it, one of the most important, just short aside, one of the most important herbs you can have is lobelia. Right, a lot of people, that's another low dose herb. Take too much, it'll make you puke. But it's called pukeweed. Yeah, that's one of the most common names for it. But very powerful drop dose expectorant for when the lungs start clogging up with mucus. Lobelia is an amazing, amazing plant. You'll pick up books and it'll say it's deadly. It's not. There's a long story behind that, which I'd love to tell, but not right now.
That herb next.
Yeah, lobelia. We'll have lobelia class. I like this one herb class. Like, this is a cool thing, right? Oh, I love doing that. Where was I? Lobelia. The problem, one of the main problems with COVID is your lungs start getting a lot of mucus in them, right? And then organisms grow, and then you get pneumonia. Right, so getting that mucus out in the very beginning, really important strategy. And the best herb that I know of for that is lobelia. And it only takes a drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, and out it comes.
I have a question about propagating it. When you planted it here, how did you do it?
Lobelia?
No.
No, pokeweed? I had some little plants that I got from somebody.
Do you know if anybody does it from seed? And how they do it?
They'll grow themselves from seed because now I've got a few babies from the seeds I've been spitting out there in the bed.
Oh, because it doesn't have to be something to break down the cell wall of the seed?
I mean, okay, poke seed propagation studies. I read quite a few of those when I was doing that. The best germination rates are if a bird poops it out.
Okay. I don't have a pet bird.
Second, here. In fact, an old name for these? Pigeonberry. As in
We catch a pigeon and then we make him poop.
pigeon abuse.
Squeeze him.
Maybe chickens, I don't know.
I wouldn't dig too
Pigeonberries, as in passenger pigeon.
Oh, well.
You guys like passenger pigeon? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's one of the first animals we caused to go extinct because people thought it was funny to like shoot masses of them and sometimes eat them. So there's no more passenger pigeons, but these were named after them because it was their favorite food,
That's
right?
sad. Oh, so you didn't I just thought you started from seed and you did something.
Well, so number 1, a bird poops it out. Number 2, you would actually do the sandpaper and stratification thing, and maybe give them a little like vinegar soak. So you're trying to etch the seed coat basically, and then they like to freeze over winter before they grow. So stratification.
And could we just try planting like
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. You'll see out there, there's the 2 I planted, which are huge now. I'm really pleased with them. But then there's a few babies, because usually what I do is I go out there, I eat a berry, I spit the seeds all over the area, and now we've got some of them coming up. So a few of them have planted themselves out there.
If you were to dig a few up.
don't know. I haven't tried, but I did plant them from little plants somebody gave me in pots, or I got them, I don't know, at a conference or
Boy dug
something.
that one up, brought it home on the airplane. I planted it in a pot, and it leaped into the greenhouse and it leaped outside.
So there you go.
In an indigenous area.
Yeah, he dug it up in North Carolina.
Cool. There's your answer. So it's a North Carolina poke. I'm sitting here trying to think if my poke came from North. I can't even remember where I got them already. So many things have happened. Anybody want to try a seed and a berry and removing the seeds? I keep saying like dangerous things. You want to try a seed? No, I just scratch that. Right. Okay. So remember, no teeth, right? You just mash the seed with your tongue, and then you mash the berry with your tongue.
Really?
No, you be quiet. Mash the berry with your tongue and spit every little seed out. And there may be 10, there may be more. I'll pass them around. Or if you're like, yeah, I'm not ready for that, take it and pink up your hands with it. And you can get your seeds out that way. You can add them to the collective seed cup here. Let's start this over in this direction. And any other questions about anything? COVID. Oh, yeah. So since we started talking about that, so lobelia is a really interesting herb. It has powerful expectorant. It also has powerful antispasmodic for smooth muscle, including the bronchial muscles. No, your bronchial tubes, right? So it's super interesting because different aspects of its character come out according to the needs of the situation, right? So when you've got gunk accumulating in your lungs and you need to get it out, then it's a strong expectorant. After the gunk comes out, then you get the spasmodic cough that goes on and on. And has anybody here had it? Did you get the endless?
I didn't get the cough. I was in respiratory herbs.
What's that?
I didn't get the cough part, but I had
Yeah. Yeah, it's really characteristic for this like irritated, inflamed, dry cough thing to go on. That's what happened to me. Everybody gets their own version of COVID, right? Yeah. It was like 2 weeks of just, I couldn't even lay down flat. I just coughed constantly and coughed myself to sleep over and over again. So every time I would wake up coughing, I had a big bottle of lobelia tincture. I didn't even have a dropper, and I'm like half like not in the world. So I would take that bottle, take the lid off, do this thing, just get a little smear of lobelia on my hand and lick it off. It was maybe like a drop or 2 drops, and the whole thing would relax, and I would fall asleep for like how long, I don't know. And then I would wake up coughing again and do it again, and it would relax, and I could fall asleep, So it has that kind of acute, immediate antispasmodic thing. Also applies to not just smooth muscle there, but smooth muscle anywhere. So like, GI cramping, menstrual cramping, even skeletal muscle, tight muscles, tight cramping. It has a profound relaxant effect on spasmodicity, whether that's nervous system, smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, whatever. Super strong herb. Yay! Somebody should take a picture of your fingers and like, look how she's painting with it. And you can like, my kid made a whole pokeweed painting one time, pokeberry painting. So saved a guy from an asthma attack with it one time. Who said that? Was that you? Where are these voices coming from? Yeah, so one time we were way up in the woods camp out, and the dude forgot his inhaler, and someone came and got me emergency, like, early wee hours of the morning. They're like, oh, he's having an asthma attack. I'm like, oh my God. Lobelia, go. And in that case, low dose herb, right? I'm talking drops. Dude, pour a puddle in his hand, slurp this up. And he went from to, good. Do you feel sick? No. How's your stomach? Fine. Right? High doses in acute emergencies, no nausea. If I did that right now with lobelia tincture and I took a puddle, it's like that, a tablespoon or something, I'd probably barf. Fascinating phenomenon. It's in all the old books. The nauseating power of lobelia is spent on resolving the acute crisis. I read that in a lot of old doctor books, and I'm like, how does that work? And then I saw it happen several times, and I'm like, I don't get it, but it does. They knew what they were talking about, right? Flowering tops and or seeds. So the immature seed pods are the strongest part of lobelia, but the flowering tops are pretty darn strong
So are
too.
you talking about like the decorative flower?
So that's a decorative species of it. So this is lobelia inflata is the medicinal species. Whether or not the decorative lobelias have any of the same properties is a question in my head that's been unanswered. And I wonder that because I'm growing it out there by the front gate for pretty.
Right.
And I haven't tried it to see. But the classic medicinal species is lobelia inflata. Inflated seed pods. They look like little puff balloons.
Okay.
Yeah, little puff football shaped things, sort of. But that's a mystifying phenomenon that I have no scientific explanation for that. But I've also seen it with severe muscle spasms. Like somebody throws their back out, they're like literally screaming because it hurts so bad, and like puddles of lobelia, and also topically applied the tincture, resolve, no nausea. They used to use it to puke mamas when there was stalled labor with a rigid os. Do you know about that? Oh, it was a common practice back in the day, apparently. You read some of those old, like, Southern midwifery with herbs books. If mama gets to a certain point and is just not moving, they would puke her with lobelia, and then followed by a profound muscular relaxation, and then the baby would be born. I've read old books like that says, yes, I've done this thousands of times.
We always say, like, when women are vomiting in birth, you get a free centimeter for every time you puke.
See?
So.
Yeah, I can connect you with some of that stuff if you're. I have some of it. Yeah, yay, Google and the internet and Google Books, because like you can get these old doctor books now. It's like this is a cool thing because it used to be there were only a few people who knew about this stuff, and they were like ancient leather-bound books in like the basement of the rare books collection at Yale and things like that. Now you can just go Google PDF. You can get all these old doctor books. You really want to get serious about being an herbalist. First, you're like, what the hell are they talking about? Because it's archaic medical language. But once you work through that, you can get some really cool stuff from it. So that's a good lesson about, low dose herbs in general, though. So in the case like, oh, my lungs, so I got COVID, right? There was classic sore throat and the fever, and then I went to bed, and I woke up going, I can't get air, and it felt like, how it's stuffy in the lungs. Like it felt like my lungs were stuffed up, like your nose gets stuffed up with snot or your sinuses get stuffed up. My lungs felt that way. And I woke up and I'm like, oh, this is not a good road to go down. This leads to a bad place. So I had the licking the lobelia off the hand, and I just started coughing up the most disgusting, too much information, bloody blobs of mucus until they were out, and then I could breathe again. It's like someone threw open the fresh air window after that.
Did that take you before you?
That was like, I don't know, maybe an hour. Yeah, and then it switched. It's like, okay, we're not going to kill you with pneumonia. Let's have a spasmodic coughing party for the next 2 weeks, because you get this inflammation. So then you switch into other sets of like soothing, licorice is big, soothing anti-inflammatory, mucilaginous, relaxant respiratory herbs, etc.
And how long was your process of healing?
I'm still doing it actually, but about 3 weeks to a month was most of the stuff was gone, followed by autoimmune flare-up characteristics, lasting fatigue. Yeah, they say that stuff can like do all kinds of neurological and cardiovascular things to you and mess with your kidneys. I mean, it drives me up the frickin' wall when people say, oh, it's just influenza, it's just a cold. I'm like, clearly you're not paying attention, because there's a lot more going on than that,
How long ago did you contract it?
It was in March,
Oh, so
mid-March.
very
Yeah. So interestingly, I just have to tell you all this because it's fascinating how the body throws things off. So it kind of dragged on, you know. So I have underlying autoimmune condition. So, you know, there was like the acute phase, the exhaustion phase, the gradually fading inflammatory, like we're going weeks and weeks. And then I was just extra tired, you know, like really tired, like drag yourself around tired. And that went on until I got a toothache about a month ago. I had this big flare up, intense toothache, and I'm like, fuck. So I get all over that. Oops, cuss word. I said foo. I got all over that with the spray, with like the echinacea, the spilanthes, the Oregon grape, you know, all the things, the propolis, everything you do for a toothache, and just saturated, like, you know, just carry the thing with it. Just like, and next day, toothache was gone, and I woke up and I'm like, hey, why do I have so much energy? It was like the throwing off of that deep fatigue by that, you know, acute infectious crisis. Yeah, and after that, I've been like, I feel like I'm back to what it was before the COVID. Yeah. So it was pretty persistent. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm one of those people that was kind of in the high risk category, you know, because I'm 60 years old, I have an autoimmune condition. So, yeah. That was a real education. I'm glad I got it when I got it, though, because now I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to worry about giving it to people.
Sure. I thought I read some stuff where they weren't sure.
They're not entirely sure, but the latest information that came out recently, like within the last week, is like, hey, it's looking like these antibodies are staying active for pretty darn long. Yeah, it's going in that direction. Like, nothing is sure with new disease entity, but
It's kind of individualistic too, like the disease itself.
yeah, to some degree. I mean, I haven't had the antibody test, but all signs are pointing towards pretty extended immunity.
Well, hopefully they've gotten the antibody test better, because.
Yeah, that's the thing with the testing too. It's
Yeah, they can only test back like 3 months.
it's a little sketch.
For an antibody test.
I don't think they're that accurate. My husband, I know he had COVID. He had like 10 symptoms, including
Yeah.
the COVID toe, the
Yeah.
body rash, all that stuff. And they tested him, sent it to the Mayo Clinic, and it came back negative.
It's under development. Let's just
way.
put it that way. The testing is still under development.
like-
It's not like proof by any means. Yeah, and there's a bunch of different tests. There's a bunch of different skill sets of people taking them and blah 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 blah. I don't know how useful they are actually. I think it's you know, give it a few years and the tests will be dialed in. You know what I mean?
And by then it'll be something else.
Yeah, that won't be our problem anymore. But yeah, I know people who have like, you know, tested negative 3 times and then positive, or have been like so obvious and totally tested negative, and then they have antibodies when they get in. So it's just like, it's a developing situation. But anyway, so lobelia. So the point there was low dose herb, except in certain circumstances where you can dose really high with it, right? I wouldn't like give people puddles of poke root tincture, because lobelia is actually non-toxic, although it's extremely dramatic. So, okay, profound lobelia overdose, just for fun. We had a student who decided they would overdose on lobelia. And so first there was lots of vomiting, and then they got really cold, and then they passed out on the couch for hours and hours. And I was fascinated by that. So I went back, you know, Russian person, cool person. Let's see what happens. But I went back and I looked, and that's how they used to do induced coma. As a healing strategy. Like if somebody was in, you know, some kind of like intense situation where they needed to lay the person out for a while, they would do it with super high dose lobelia. That's what the expert botanical physicians of yore would do that, you know, because it's such a profound like nervous system relaxant that you could take somebody down to being unconscious for a few days, and then they would wake up and be fine. You're like, whoa, right? So super powerful, but it wouldn't kill you. That much poke root, that's a different story. You know, that would be like probably hospital time if you survived. So that's a more toxic herb. Lobelia is just more powerful and dramatic, you know. Wow, we're just jumping right into it, aren't we? All right, so let's get ourselves over there and visit the pokeweed real quick before lunch. Do we have time?
Oh.
So these are the two big pokeweeds, so like half of us can go over here, and then here's the way this garden works. There actually is a path. Well, you can kind of see it. Now that we did our like manic harvesting yesterday, sort of this is the path up the middle. Just kind of try not to trample. This is the auroch, by the way. Oh. So if you want some auroch seeds, it looks like maybe you could pick some auroch seeds. But see the color, right? So they're, you know, they've bolted and gone to seed, but this is what I'm talking about. This is also beetleians. You see the color? And in the stem? Sorry. Right, so you can just eat these. I mean, they're not so, well, they're not bad now, actually. I'm surprised. Non-toxic beetleian alkaloid fest. If you want to come in, you can come in.
What are you eating?
This is auroch. O-R-A-C-H.
Yeah. So you're, oh, they have berries.
Yeah, these are the seeds. Well, the seeds. Anybody who wants to like pick some of these and try to grow them, go for it.
That's the unripe seed.
Whoa, this plant just captured me. Over here. So, see, this is one that planted itself. Nice. And there's another one in here. There's another one somewhere. I forget where it is now, but there's another one. So it's spreading. Ooh, the wind is chilly. Ooh. Okay, so look at this gorgeous beast. Whoa, look at this. Oopsie. This is cool. Check this out, you guys. So we wouldn't use these because they're not mature. But see the bumps? I'll pass this around. Look at the bumps.
Oh, the seeds.
Yeah, it's showing you where the seed is. Right? So if you counted those bumps, then you might often get 10. Okay? And it's like,
and the immature ones.
yeah, look at the green ones. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
so
is
those
bizarre.
we don't use those because they're, you know, they don't have their beetleian alkaloids developed. So they're just, look how many. This is why I didn't want it to freeze last night because I was like, everybody can have pokeberries.
There we go.
All over. Go for it.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I've seen like edible ones at Thanksgiving in southern Missouri, you know, so they're like late summer, fall, right up until the frost wipes them out. And then, you know, even if there was like a good frost, all the leaves would be like, but the pokeberries would still be like, but then, you know.
And then you said it dries. And then it dies back to the ground.
Right to the ground. Yeah. The stalk will just lose all its color and eventually fall over.
Then it all
And
drains back into the root.
yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, all the energy back down into the root, and then I just heap straw up over it to keep it from, you know, high mountain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, no, these are. Look how beautiful it is. It makes a nice pattern for a shirt.
Yeah. There's so much artistic potential in this plant. It's just phenomenal. Look at them. They're just so powerful.
Lisa, when would you harvest your root?
So, fall. When the top dies back, that's the best time. Because like all the focus, like, so traditional herbalism, we say the energy goes back down into the root. Well, so does like the phytochemical focus, because really phytochemicals are just little energy beings. Yeah. You know what an atom is? It's not like a hard little ball that rolls around. It's like mostly empty space and energy. You know, matter is energy, right? It's just slow energy. In other words, E equals mc squared. energy is mass times the speed of light squared. So matter, it's all energy. This is just slow energy. Yeah. So when the energy or the, chemistry goes back down into the root, when the top, after a frost, when it all dies back, that's when I dig them, ideally.
How much of the root can you take and still have it come back for you?
I don't know, because like I said, the last time I dug it up, I dug one up with a digging fork, Yeah, but I guess you could slice a lateral off or something if you wanted not to kill your plant. But that was like, in some places there's a lot of these. Like I'm probably not gonna dig these roots up, maybe ever. I'm probably gonna call up my buddy in North Carolina and be like, hey, I need some poke root or something, assuming that still happens. But yeah, but I love that this little one is coming up. And somebody asked a question.
How big do you think the root is on these plants?
Oh, I don't know, I'm guessing, right? But maybe,
So not super long taproot or...
yeah, I mean, they're pretty young, for
Right.
pokeweeds.
How
So,
big do they grow and when they're native?
so the biggest one I've ever seen was like leaning up against a barn. And I would say it was, see the top edge of this structure right here with the pizza oven? It was higher than the top edge. Yeah,
And how wide?
wide,
Okay.
big, rangy. That was the biggest one I've ever seen in North Carolina. I'm like, look at you, it was growing upside of a tobacco barn.
Oh, okay.
But usually they're like this big, if they're a big one,
Okay.
Yeah, like I've looked up at quite a few pokeberries, so these are getting up there. I'm really pleased by how they're proliferating. So yeah, like this is not what we would ingest, right? Only when they come up out of the ground, a little sprout, and then 2 changes of water, right? So here they are. Nothing else looks like this. It's the most colorful plant in the woods a lot of times. It likes margins of woods. And yeah, I'm super happy they, blessed us and honored us to grow here like they have been. So you're welcome to come in and touch them if you'd like or anything. We're all starving, aren't we? I'm feeling hungry. Well, I'll eat with you, and if you have any other things you want to talk about, we can just casually talk as we're having lunch, and then I'm going to bed.
Because you're tired.
Yeah.